31-year-old Staff Sergeant Darren Hoover, 25-year-old Sergeant Johanny Rosario Pichardo, 23-year-old Sergeant Nicole G., 22-year-old Corporal Hunter Lopez, 23-year-old Corporal Dagan Page, 22-year-old Corporal Humberto Sanchez, 20-year-old David Espinoza, 20-year-old Jared Schmitz, 20-year-old Riley McCullum, 20-year-old Corporal Dylan Marola, 20-year-old Corporal Kareem Nakui. From the Navy Hospitalman Maxton Soviak, 22 years old. And from the Army, Staff Sergeant Ryan Naus, 23 years old. It is stunning and difficult to comprehend how young so many of these were in their early 20s. And that is part of what makes this, just a small part of what makes this so incredibly difficult, because they were at the beginning of their lives, the beginning of their adventures, and yet they chose, with their bravery and their heroism, to go out there and not only to help their fellow service members and their fellow citizens, but the citizens of another country, to help them escape Afghanistan and to try to come to the U.S., to try to find a better life. And it is in that service, as part of that mission, that they paid the ultimate sacrifice. Wolf, may their memory be a blessing as we watch these dignified transfers continue.
Yes, indeed. Our deepest, deepest condolences to their loving families and to their friends. You know, Caitlin, I know you're getting some information. There's a pool of media correspondents who are there. What are you learning?
With him today, of course, obviously staying out of the way, out of the respect for the families. And I just want to note one thing. If you're watching this and you notice it is silent, there is no audio, that is obviously out of respect for the transfer. And you can see the doors closing there now that they have loaded the 13 cases into these vans with the remains of the 13 service members.
Like, you know, the President of the United States is the commander-in-chief.
But Wolf, I just want to note how quiet it is. It's as quiet almost there as well for those reporters on the ground who say essentially barely any sound has been made. You saw the President and the Defense Secretary and the First Lady go up into the belly of the aircraft earlier. A small prayer was said in there. Of course, no one was present. The reporters were not present for that. But even there on the tarmac, it is incredibly quiet as well. You just heard them keeping track, of course, keeping time as they were putting these transfer cases into the back of these vans. But other than that, Wolf, there is very little said here. It is a very solemn moment during this dignified transfer as it's underway. Almost as quiet there as it is without the audio.
You're absolutely right. The unspoken words, the silence, they are so incredibly powerful. Let's watch a little bit more as this transfer, this dignified transfer, continues. The President of the United States, First Lady of the United States, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, others, the top military brass, the commander at the Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, Colonel Matthew Huseman, Mrs. Sarah Huseman, wife of Colonel Huseman, Colonel Chip Hollinger, commander of the Air Force Mortuary Affairs Operations, Dover Air Force Base, a very powerful, moving moment as this dignified transfer is wrapping up right now, and we see the President, the First Lady, the Secretary of Defense moving on. Very powerful moment. Let me get some final thoughts as we watch from Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. Give us some final thoughts, General.
Wolf, it's tough. It's just tough to see this. I mentioned before that this was an ongoing event at Dover over the last 20 years, both from those who had sacrificed in Afghanistan and Iraq and several other places around the world. These ceremonies have gone on sometimes almost daily, like during the surge in different countries, but you never get used to them. I would suspect that now, today, because we're seeing hopefully the last casualties coming out of Afghanistan, this is especially gripping. It's the names of anyone in a conflict that is the last to give their life is always the toughest. When you think something is over, and we have, as we've conducted this evacuation, the end of this 20-year war, to have more casualties, to have more sacrifice is just, it rips you apart. All of us who have served, and some of us who haven't, have been thinking about this for a long time. But today really puts an exclamation point on the fact that we have still lost a lot of great lives, a lot of people who are willing to stand up and put on the cloth of their country and serve somewhere that's sometimes difficult, sometimes painful, but oftentimes very rewarding. There's going to be a lot of veterans who probably watch this programming, who watch this transfer of remains, and who observed those caskets, who are going to be crushed by this. So many veterans who have dedicated so much blood and sweat and tears to this conflict over the last 20 years, who are going to be hurting right now. And what I'd kind of like to say to all of them is if there is hurt, make sure you reach out to a battle buddy, that you share that hurt with someone who understands, and that you take these emotions and really understand that you contributed to an attempt to make a part of the world better. And that's what certainly these 13 young people did, is they were put into this truck. They need to know that they were responsible for the evacuation of over 100,000 families, 120,000 individuals. And because of that, those people are going to have a better life. Now, certainly there will be questions about those who didn't get out, who weren't evacuated, but 120,000 people who are going to have a better life somewhere in the world than in Afghanistan under the Taliban are certainly grateful for the sacrifice that these 13 made.